nothing I love more than some good old-fashioned late winter cleaning out. What do we got here? There's all the stuff I found. Look, I got like a bag full of nickels. Got old battle axe. It's always good to have my old battle axe ready for action. Ooh, the accordion. That's an interesting. My flute. My flute. I thought I had lost you. Wonder if it still works. If one were to ask a modern Yu-Gi-Oh player what they would consider an iconic card, the vast majority would unquestionably describe Dot Magician or the Blue Eyes White Dragon, cards that are symbolic of the original main characters of Yu-Gi-Oh's past that have influenced the ace monsters of every main character ever since, as well as spawning an obnoxious amount of legacy support. However, a few cherished members of the community might recall a band of fluffballs that have also managed to make their home in the hearts and minds of the fans, those being the Kuribohs. Kuriboh is an archetype of mostly level 1 light dark feigned fairy monsters whose predominant gameplay mechanic is based around defending the player from all sorts of evil nasties that are coming to take out their butts. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at every member of the Kuriboh archetype. We're going to be taking a look at what that Kuriboh is, what it does, and how it stacks up in today's game. Bear in mind that I have made a Kuriboh review in the past, so any of the older members of the Kuriboh archetype, I do plan on keeping things brief, as I would prefer to talk more about the newer Kuribohs in today's video. I will leave the original link down below. So let's go ahead and kick this video off with the OG Kuriboh, the level 1 Dark Fiend with 300 attack and 200 defense, which can be discarded during the damage calc when your opponent's monster declares an attack to reduce damage to 0. This great granddaddy of every modern hand trap in the game may initially seem unassuming to the plebeian mind. However, Kuriboh happens to be the most versatile of all the Kuriboh monsters in the archetype, seeing as it has the most synergy with their spell and eventual trap lineup. You're going to want to run 3 copies of Kuriboh in any given Kuriboh deck, not because of the effect that it has, but because the synergy it has with its all-powerful spells is just that good. Now, a couple little tidbits of information you may not know about Kuriboh is that the name Kuriboh, meaning a little chestnut person in Japanese, happens to also be the name of the Goomba from the Mario series, implying that Mr. Chris Pratt will have to face off against Kuribohs in the new Mario movie. You may also not know that Kuriboh is in fact a Butterfree. In order to understand what makes the original Kuriboh so good, let's take a quick dive into the spell lineup with the quick play spells Multiply and Multiply allows you to tribute a Kuriboh to summon as many Kuriboh tokens, all with the same stat line as the OG Kuriboh, as possible in defense mode, but they cannot be tributed for a tribute summon. Whereas Detonate allows you to destroy as many Kuriboh and Kuriboh tokens you control to destroy a like number of cards your opponent controls. Multiply is the more often used of the two cards, being able to spam out 5 different Kuriboh tokens to your side of the field without restricting your summons, unlike a card such as Scapegoat. This in turn can lead you into summoning out monsters like IP Masquerena and Proxy Dragon, which can lead to you summoning out quickly very powerful Link 4 monsters such as Mech Knight Crusadia Alpharamax, Boral Sword Dragon, and of course the ever unstoppable Ogave Dragon. Detonate isn't used quite as often as its counterpart, but there is a consideration to be made for a control-themed Kuriboh deck, where summoning out a bunch of Kuriboh tokens and then nuking your opponent's board during their turn is something you could consider. However, you usually make better use of the tokens on your turn rather than using them to destroy your opponent, when you can just use something like, say, Torrential Tribute or the like. But it is funny how this card just mentions how Kuribohs love to self-destruct when they hit your opponent. I mean, I don't know why they do that. Did somebody put something in Kuriboh's food? I didn't do that. Who did that? You usually want to max out on your multiplies in order to ensure the big old Link plays in whatever situation you need to have big old Link plays, and Detonate is a card you want more by preference if you want to have yourself a more control-centric Kuriboh deck. So now that we've talked about the OG Kuriboh, let's go ahead into talking about the descendants of our big old Kuriboh daddy. The 5 Kuriboh brothers first introduced in the Yugioh anime are Kuriboh, Kuribi, Kuriboh, Kuribeh, and Kuriboh, who is the 5th of the Kuriboh brothers. He's the big brother of the Kuriboh brothers. Kuriboh and Kuriboh are your searching monsters. Kuriboh can summon out a Kuriboh from your deck if he or another Kuriboh is destroyed by battle, and he contributes himself with the other Kuriboh brothers to summon Kuribabylon from your hand, deck, or grave. Kuriboh can add yourself any spell trap that mentions Kuriboh in its text from your deck to hand when destroyed by battle or card effect, as well as changing the attack of as many of your monsters to 0 to negate an instance of attack of your opponent's monsters. Kuriboh can discard himself if your opponent declares an attack in order to add a Kuriboh monster from your deck to your hand, and can discard traps to weaken an opponent's monster by 1500, whereas Kuriboh can discard himself to boost a Kuriboh by 1500 permanently, and contribute all the Kuriboh brothers to add Kuribandit from deck to hand, and give you an additional summon of a fiend. And of course there's also Kuriboh in the Kuriboh brothers, but I just mentioned Kuriboh. Have you forgotten I've already talked about this guy? I don't need to mention how good he is. So yes, the Kuriboh brothers are a set of monsters I never actually thought Konami was going to print, mostly because of their anime effects being fairly garbage, but they certainly did a fairly decent job with them in the TCG. Kuriboh and Kuriboh are definitely the best of the Kuriboh brothers. They are allowing you to search out any of your Kuribohs, and especially searching out all your powerful spells, and the eventual trap that I'm sure Kuribohs are going to earn themselves. It would be nice if these two would discard themselves in order to search, but it works just as well as keeping them on the board, even though typically you're going to be summoning these guys out in order to make more link plays. Kuriboh, on the other hand, allows you to discard himself to add a Kuriboh, which is amazing, considering there's a lot of good Kuribohs we haven't even talked about, which you want to search to your hand, and it even searches the original Kuriboh, so all's good there. As for the trap discarding, it's irrelevant now, but wait for that Kuriboh trap. Trust me, it's going to be all worth it. As for Kuriboh, his attack stat boost isn't really that important, considering the Kuribohs have never been all about attack boosting, but because of Kuribabylon, who we'll get into in a moment, it's actually not the worst thing in the world. Plus, he allows you to just go for Kuribandit, which is nice. It's a nice thing. It's not an effect you're going to use very often, but it is nice to have it around. I run one each of the Kuriboh brothers so that I can use them for more link spamming, as you really don't need to have more than one, considering how you summon them out, being the normal spell 5-star Twilight, which allows you to tribute a level 5 monster if it's the only monster you control, to summon the Kuriboh brothers from your hand, deck, or graveyard, but they can't be used to tribute for a tribute summon. This card is amazing. I didn't actually think Konami would print this thing either, but they did. Crazy mad lads that they are, they made a card that lets you spam out 5 monsters with different names, making for easy Saryuja plays. Some very excellent targets for 5-star Twilight include the likes of Link Slayer, which doubles his spell trap removal, the Tricky, who can discard other Kuriboh monsters to the grave and set up your graveyard for later, Kaiser Force Raider, which is a dark monster and has Allure of Darkness target painted all over it, and of course Garbage Lord, because why would you not want to run Garbage Lord? It's just such a good card. But yes, I'll typically run between 2 and 3 5-star Twilights to ensure big old spam of Kuribohs and having all the links in the world that I'll ever want and need. And finally, for the Kuriboh brother lineup, we take a look at their boss monster, Kuribabylon, and I'm just going to leave this image here because that is exactly what it is. This is a level 5 Dark Fiend, 1500 attack and 1000 defense. He gets 300 attack and defense for every Kuriboh you control is in the graveyard. And also, if you have more monsters in your grave than your opponent does, you can summon them from your hand. And during the main or battle phase, you can return him to the hand to summon the Kuriboh brothers from your hand or grave. Kuribabylon may initially seem like a good target for 5-star Twilight, however, it isn't. It really isn't. You really don't want to have the situation where this is your target for 5-star. It's a nice big beat stick. You can have this thing get some pretty nasty big numbers, especially if your graveyard's loaded with Kuribohs. You typically won't want to run more than one of him, however, because he can be a bit bricky. And it really depends on how many Kuribohs you have in the grave to make him as big and bad as he possibly can get. And being able to tag himself out in order to, fill the board with more Kuriboh brothers is a very nice effect, especially in late game where you can just summon him out, bounce him back, bring out the Kuriboh brothers, go for link plays, whatever you want to do. Next up, we take a look at one of the best pieces of Kuriboh support ever printed in the world. That being Kuriboh, and a level 1 light fiend with 300 attack, 200 defense, which at the end of the battle phase can be discarded to revive a monster in your grave that was destroyed by battle that turn. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can banish this card from the grave to target any number of Kuribohs in the grave to special summon them. To this day, I have vowed that if I am ever to make a trip to Japan, I will immediately find myself at Konami headquarters, break down the front door, discover who made this card, and shake their hand so vigorously that security is going to have to be called on to throw me out of the building. This is just an amazing piece of Kuriboh support. Not only can it revive a destroyed Kuriboh, such as Kuriboh, Kuribi, or some of their other members, in order to reuse them, but the graveyard effect is absolutely balls to the walls amazing. Being able to essentially soul charge 5 monsters during your opponent's battle phase is just absolutely crazy. But to add to that, it's not once per turn, is not limited to monsters being attacked or if you're being attacked directly. And as well, it doesn't negate the effects of the monsters revived by its effect. I mean, it's just amazing. It's an insanely good card. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what religion this guy is trying to get me to sign up for, but sign me up for it. I don't care. Take my blood. Take my blood. Take it, Kuriboh, and take my blood. But yeah, depending on the Kuriboh build you're going to go for, you run between 1 and 3 copies of this card. And also stock up on Barrel from the different dimensions, because if you do, you can Kuriboh so hard your opponent doesn't know what to do with themselves. Continuing the graveyard shenanigans for Kuriboh, we have Clear Kuriboh, a level 1 light fairy with 200 attack, 200 defense, which when your opponent activates a monster effect that will inflict damage to you, you can discard him to negate the activation. And when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can banish him to draw a card, and if you draw a monster, you can summon that monster and change the attack targets to it. Yeah, funny story about Kuribohs. They are flammable, that's right, they don't like burn damage. So while Clear Kuriboh isn't the best for stopping burn damage, he does stop some monster effect damage, especially if your opponent's got Gustav. Just shove this Matryoshka doll-looking little brother down Gustav's barrel and watch him fly to the moon. He's not as useful as he used to be. Nowadays, you want to have more focus on the link spam of Kuribohs. But in a slower, controller-centric Kuriboh deck, or just any other sort of Kuriboh deck in general, running a copy or two of Clear Kuriboh isn't such a bad idea. Now let's take a look at a slightly different monster, that being Kuribandit. A level 3 Dark Fiend with 1000 attack and 700 defense, which during the end phase of it being normal summoned, you can tribute this card to excavate 5 cards from the top of your deck, add an excavated spell trap, and send the remaining cards to the graveyard. Now, you'll notice about Kuribandit here is that he is technically not a Kuriboh monster. Unlike the Kuriboh brothers who have that staple onto their effect, this guy is technically not a Kuriboh. He looks like a Kuriboh, he smells like a Kuriboh, he tastes like a Kuriboh, but is in fact more of what you would call a Kuriboh cousin, if you will. As you can tell with Kuriboh, Kuribohs do enjoy themselves a bit of graveyard setup. Not something they typically use their normal summon on, but it is something nice that you can use alongside Saryuja in order to help set up your graveyard. Where Kuribandit really shined, however, was in early Phantom Knight Burning Abyss decks, where the normal summon of Kuribandit allowed you to flood the graveyard with all the Phantom Knights and all the Burning Abyss you would ever want, in order to make big old plays the next turn. It's not as useful in those decks nowadays, as they have essentially merged to become one deck and have enough support that they don't need Kuribandit as much, but he did make his mark on the game in those decks, and it is something to never scoff at. Also, the original anime effect was completely absurd because it allowed you to get all the excavated spell traps you excavated. However, that monster did need to be summoned by the Kuriboh, so it is what it is. Next up, we look at Relink Kuriboh, a level 1 Dark Fiend with 300 attack, 200 defense, and it clearly is set to gore someone, as this guy's got claws for days. Anywho, if this card is tributed, you get to draw a card, and if your monster will be destroyed by battle, you can banish from the grave instead. Now, funny thing about Relink Kuriboh is that he was essentially made as relinquish support. Yeah, the whole idea of this guy being tributed is just so you can tribute him for ritual spells and things. Granted, you can tribute him from anything and get that draw, and it's not once per turn, so I guess this is the secret OP Exodia tech card that nobody knows about. You just keep tributing this guy for whatever. Keep drawing them cards. That's all you need to do. But yeah, Relink Kuriboh not as useful in a Kuriboh deck, although I usually just tech in a 1 copy of this card, just that if I happen to have it in my graveyard, it's able to save my monsters from a quick bit of destruction. Next up, we have Ankh Kuriboh, a level 1 Dark Fiend, same stats as the other Kuribohs, And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can discard it to revive a monster from either graveyard, but send it to the grave during the end phase. And if it's destroyed by a battle or card effect and sent to the grave, you can add a monster born from deck or graveyard to your hand during the end phase. Now, Kuriboh is certainly an interesting member of this archetype, essentially just being monster born from the hand, allowing you to revive a monster during the battle phase, which there are certainly a number of monsters that you can do with this with. I'm thinking especially of things like Thunderclap Skyverf as being one of the chief members of this list. However, it must be said of Kuriboh that it doesn't negate the effects of the monsters that it summons, allowing you to use the effects of your opponent's monsters if you happen to be able to go into them. So if your opponent has, I don't know, Machina Citadel in their graveyard, you can revive it with Kuriboh in order to nuke your opponent's field. That's certainly an interesting sort of thing you could do. Also, being able to recover your monster borns is always nice. Depending on the sort of build you're going for, Kuriboh can be run as a 1 or a 2 of, depending on how often you want to revive monsters during the battle phase. I leave it up to you. Next, we have Spherical Kuriboh, a level 1 Dark Fiend, same stats. Looking very much like the Winged Dragon of Ra, is in fact more relinquished support. When this opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send this card from your hand to the grave to change it to defense mode. And if you ritual summon, you can use this guy from the grave as one of the materials for that ritual summon. So yeah, Kuribohs, back in the day when they were running rampant with things like Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, this was Kuriboh's out to monsters like that. Monsters that can't be targeted, monsters you don't want attacking you. Sphere Kuriboh was your defense against things like that. It's not as useful nowadays since links are a thing, and, you know, you can't even put linked monsters in face-down attack position, and that's just cruelty, I tell you. Cruelty! But yeah, Sphere Kuriboh definitely has had his time. He's not as useful as nowadays. Again, depending on the sort of build you're making, he can be run. If you want to build a very much good relinquished fusion deck around Sphere Kuriboh and Relink Kuriboh, go ahead and tech in a couple copies of this boy. Next up, we have Magic Kuriboh, a level 1 Dark Fiend, which, during the main or battle phase, if you took damage from a battle or an opponent's card effect, you can send this card from hand to the grave to summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from the deck or the graveyard. And if a face-up spellcaster is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can add this card from your grave to your hand. This is not a Kuriboh. This is Dark Magician support. In fact, this is something we need to discuss. This is a Kuriboh monster that has absolutely nothing to do with his archetype other than his name and his looks. Now, granted, I do like the idea that Magic Kuriboh mugged Dark Magician to get that cosplay, but that doesn't excuse the fact that he doesn't help his own archetype in any way, shape, or form. Hell, Kuriboh came out in the set with Felgrand, and he still supports his archetype out the wazoo. This guy, I guess if you really wanted to make that Dark Magician Kuriboh deck, because of course Dark Magicians need so much more support. You can't give Dark Magicians enough support. They always need more support. So yeah, don't run this into an actual Kuriboh deck. Alright, getting to the end of the DM era Kuribohs, let's take a look at Skilled Chestnut Magician, one of their newest support cards, which is a level 4 Dark Spellcaster with 300 attack and 200 defense. And every time a spell is activated, you can put a spell counter on this guy when that spell resolves. And you can remove one of the spell counters from this guy to either increase his level and give him a 1500 point boost, or add a Kuriboh or a multiply from your deck or grave to your hand. Skilled Chestnut Magician is actually a pretty decent start 'em up monster if you can activate one of the Kuriboh spells that we'll get into in a moment. He is pretty good for starting up your plays. You can summon him out, activate the flute, which we'll get into later. Summon out a Kuriboh, add yourself a multiply, activate said multiply, go into big link play. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's certainly not necessary, but it is nice. So if you wanted to make that Dark Magician Kuriboh deck, I would tech in 3 copies of this to make your Kuriboh plays that much more consistent. And finally, for the GM era Kuribohs, a quick shout out to my boy, King Caballo, who is not a Kuriboh in any way, shape, or form, but has helped my Kuribohs in so many ways over the years that he has earned himself the honorary Kuriboh Monster Badge. He revives your Kuribohs from the grave for Xyz and Link plays. There's no reason to hate on this dang old little beastie boy. Finally getting into GX, we got Winged Kuriboh, the level 1 light fairy with 300 attack and 200 defense, which, if on the field is destroyed and sent to the grave, prevents you from taking battle damage. And no, this does not mean it prevents you from taking piercing damage. Jaden cheated that time that happened. Jokes aside, Winged Kuriboh is actually a pretty decent Kuriboh monster, able to protect you from taking damage for a whole turn. It's got synergy with the other Kuriboh support cards, so we'll get to in a minute, and has its own lineup of support exclusive to itself. Depending on the sort of build you're going to be building, whether it be a Link spam or a more control-centric build, you want to run between 1 and 3 copies of Winged Kuriboh to keep your life points in check, and also dig that Fire King synergy. Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Starting off the Winged Kuriboh line, we start with Winged Kuriboh level 9, a level 9 light fairy with questionable attack and defense, which can activate as a length 3 or higher. A special summons itself from the hand. Spells that are activated get banished instead of being sent to the grave, and it gets 500 attack and defense for every spell in your opponent's graveyard. But you can only control one Winged Kuriboh level 9. So this one's interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, opponents nowadays are going to be having lots of spells in the grave, so this thing is going to have some decently high attack if you can summon it out. It does have a fairly unique summoning condition. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's no other card that has a summoning condition like this one, but the Floodgate effect is kind of strange. You'd think this thing would either gain attack points based on the number of banished spells your opponent has, or would just not need to banish their spells at all. Like, it's just very conflicting with Winged Kuriboh level 9. What is he trying to do with those oversized meat cleavers he's got for hands? I'm not sure, but if you really want to mess with your opponent who's playing their Sky Striker deck, go ahead and tech in some Winged Kuriboh level 9s, because that's about the only deck that this thing's going to have any sort of advantage against. And calling it advantage is a bit of a stretch. Significantly more potent than level 9 is the Winged Kuriboh level 10. Ironically enough, a level 10 light fairy with 300 attack and 200 defense. This card can't be normal summoned or set. It can only be summoned by Transcendent Wings, which is a quick play spell. And it can be tributed during your opponent's battle phase to destroy all their attack position monsters and deal damage equal to their combined attack. Here we get a look at Kuriboh's original boss monster, a one-sided blazing mirror force that just says screw off to everything the opponent controls. Take all the damage. This glorious looking angel dragon thing, I'm not actually sure what Winged Kuriboh level 10 is supposed to be, is actually surprisingly decent monster. Transcendent Wings, if you're not familiar, just is a card that lets you send a face-up Winged Kuriboh and 2 cards in your hand to the grave to summon out the Winged Kuriboh level 10s. And yes, Winged Kuriboh level 10 is actually a pretty fun monster to build entire decks around. I myself have done so in the past. The only real weakness to this card, other than, Call by the Grave and every negation ever, is that it's a bit too known compared to other Kuriboh boss monsters. Most players in the game have at least heard of Winged Kuriboh level 10, so if they're seeing that you have a face-up Winged Kuriboh on your field and a set card, they're gonna have to be complete morons to just ram into Winged Kuriboh. But hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I say take a shot at it, and if you're gonna make a Winged Kuriboh level 10 deck, I recommend 2 copies. So now that we've reached the end of the GX line of Kuribohs, let's go ahead and look at some spells that work with Winged Kuriboh as well as the OG. First up, we have Generation Next, which is a quick play spell that allows you to add or special summon an E-Hero Kuriboh or Neospatian from deck or graveyard if your life points are lower than your opponent's. However, you cannot activate the effects of that card during that turn. So essentially, Generation Next is an upgraded version of Kuriboh's own search card that we'll get into in a minute. It does allow you to search any Kuriboh monster. However, since it does lock you out of using the effects of the card summoned, this limits the pool of monsters you'll be wanting to summon, specifically to Kuriboh, Winged Kuriboh on your turn so that you can have it on your opponent's turn to prevent damage if it gets destroyed, and Kuriboh to be sent to the graveyard by whatever means so that you can use its graveyard effect. Although, to be fair, it does allow you to straight up turbo out Winged Kuriboh level 9, so clearly this is the most powerful card in all the Kuriboh archetype. It lets you go for level 9 for free. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that. Jokes aside, this is a decent card for Kuribohs, nothing too special. They already have their own searching card, so run this by preference. Berserker Crush, other than giving us the glorious image of Winged Kuriboh going to sock it to him, is a quick play spell that allows you to banish a monster from your grave to target a Winged Kuriboh, and give that Winged Kuriboh the attack and defense of the banished monster. The plebeian mind immediately thinks to banishing a high-level monster while Winged Kuriboh's on the board in order to give him an emergency bit of attack boost, However, us true Kuriboh intellectuals realize that the Berserker Crush is actually the secret tech card that makes Metaphy's Kuribohs a thing. Sabantiel, the Philosopher's Stone, is a normal spell, which, if you have Winged Kuriboh in your grave, you can pay half your life to add a polymerization spell or fusion spell from your deck to your hand, and if you have 3 copies of it in your grave, you can banish it to make a monster really big until the end of the turn. Again, not something Kuribohs usually play. I mean, it's not like they have a fusion monster. I mean, why would you think that they have a fusion monster? They don't have anything of the sort. But it is certainly an interesting card, Sabantiel. I'm surprised more decks don't consider it, considering you can, have Winged Kuriboh in your graveyard and search any polymerization or fusion spell. It's pretty nutty. It's not even a once per turn, for that matter, so I don't know why the secret fusion tech card is left alone. Maybe it's too big brain for all those meta players to think about. And finally, we taking a look at Kuriboh's searching power, the Flute of Summoning Kuriboh, a quick play spell that lets you take a Kuriboh or Winged Kuriboh from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it. The heart and soul of Kuriboh's searching power is, in fact, this musical instrument of mass destruction, allowing you to turbo out Kuriboh to use it for multiply for link plays, summoning out Winged Kuriboh to protect yourself from damage, adding Kuriboh to your hand in order to protect yourself from damage, baiting out your opponent's max Cs, which is something hilarious and something you can fully do. This is an amazing card that really helps out Kuribohs a lot. I do really wish Konami would retrain it to work on all Kuribohs, although to be fair, I think they might be too scared of Kuribohs to do that, but if they ever did it, oh, the gloriousness of that will be. Anyway, we max out on this card and you never play any less than 3 of it. Now let's go ahead into the 5Ds era of Kuriboh, starting out with Junk Kuriboh, a level 1 Earth Machine, same stats as all the Kuribohs. And when your opponent activates a card or effect that will inflict damage to you, you can send this card from your hand to the field to the grave to negate and destroy that card. He's not quite as good as Clear Kuriboh, because, while Junk Kuriboh stops any effect damage, Clear Kuriboh has that nifty graveyard effect. In fact, I would say that Junk Kuriboh is almost too tame, considering that its manga counterpart had a very broken effect, where you could discard it in an instance when you take battle or effect damage that would end the duel, and then destroy the card that was about to do the damage. Once per turn, mind you, but if that card had been printed as is, Junk Kuriboh would probably be banned. If I was gonna say anything like, actually lacking in the TCG version, why is this guy not a tuner when he is from the 5Ds era of Kuribohs? Level 1's a great level for a tuner, so I don't understand why Junk Kuriboh's not a tuner. It's very strange. I mean, you can tell how angry he is. He's got that screw up his butt. And finally, for the 5Ds era, yes, there's only 2 Kuribohs in the 5Ds era, we have Kuriboh, a level 1 light fairy, which during damage calc, when attacked, can bounce itself from the field to the hand. You take no damage from that battle, and your opponent gains life equal to the attacking monster's attack. This is absolute trash by Kuriboh standards. This effect isn't applied to anything that Kuribohs want to do. Giving your opponent free life points doesn't help. This card is more often run in Nurse Reficule, even though that deck has way better options. The only really important thing to note about Kuriboh is that Kuriboh is what is a girl Kuriboh. That is right, the female version of Kuriboh looks like this. They have tails. If you're wondering why they have tails, it's in order to restrain the male during the dirty deeds, which is an important fact for all children to know. And also, as I was pointed out in a live stream recently, this card looks like it'd be perfectly fit on the lap of an evil James Bond villain. Prepare yourself, Mr. Bond. Things are about to get furry up in here. Now it's time to look at the Zexal era Kuribohs. There are quite a few Kuribohs on this part, and by quite a few, I mean there's like 4. Rainbow Kuriboh is a level 1 Light Fiend with 100 attack and defense, which can, when opponent's monster declares an attack, equip itself to that monster and stop it from attacking, and can revive itself when your opponent declares a direct attack, but gets banished when it leaves the field. Simple, not effective. Rainbow Kuriboh used to be a decent choice in early Kuriboh variants, as it was able to slap itself onto opponent's monster and stop it from attacking, thus forcing your opponent to either use up resources getting rid of it, or link away a monster they normally wouldn't want to get linked away, but that's not really very often useful nowadays. Stopping one monster, not going to be effective, and there's enough negation in the game that Rainbow Kuriboh just isn't very good. I'll give him a round of applause because he has been a good boy in the past, but nowadays the game has just evolved to a point where Rainbow is just not as useful. Also, let's take a look at that tail. That's a girl Kuriboh, apparently. You wouldn't tell, but that's what it is. Next up, we have Astral Kuriboh, which is one of the newer pieces of Kuriboh support, a level 1 light fiend with 100 attack defense. Literally the ghost of Rainbow Kuriboh after he died the second time. And you can reveal a number exceeds in your extra deck to summon this card with a level equaling the rank of the monster revealed. Stops you from summoning except for exceeds while it's on the field, but a monster using it as exceeds material can't be beaten by battle or card effects. Certainly a nice piece of exceeds material for any deck that likes to make number exceeds monster. There's quite a few of those. Kuribohs themselves love them some good old number 54 Lionheart. Certainly a card that you can run a couple copies of depending on the sort of deck you're running. Personally, I only run one in my Kuriboh deck, but that's just me. You could run up to 3 if you really felt like it. Kuriboh is a level 1 light fiend who can send himself from your hand to the grave and pay 2,000 life to take no damage for a turn, and if it's in the grave, you can ditch a photon, except for itself, and add it from grave to hand. It's literally Torpedo Girl. They turned Kuriboh into a Torpedo Girl-esque card. Yeah, this isn't even a good photon card. Like, I understand that Konami was in a weird place in early Zexal era, but they turned Kuriboh into a torpedo. I mean, it's the most intense-looking torpedo I've seen since Penguin Torpedo, but I really don't see this run in literally anything ever. I will say that he does adhere to the Kuriboh playstyle of protecting your life. He just requires a blood donation to do so. But yeah, don't run this card. Next up, we've got Kuriboh, a level 1 light thunder monster with the same stats as all of the Kuribohs, which can target an exceeds monster that has a material, detach materials from it, and summon another copy of Kuriboh from your deck, but you can't use it as synchro material. Damn it, if that ain't a shame, because I was gonna take a few of these into my Kuriboh synchro deck. Jokes aside, this is an interesting throwback to early Zexal era. Summoning out multiple versions of itself is cute, but there's a few problems with Kuriboh. For starters, in order to use its effect the best, you have to only have one Kuriboh in your hand, because if you top deck into multiples of this thing, its effect immediately becomes very much lessened. Add to this effect has nothing to do with defensive plays whatsoever, means it's not much of a Kuriboh. I mean, it's not even a Kuriboh, it's a Kuriboh cousin, but you know what I mean. However, I will give some credit to Kuriboh, because during my early years on Yugioh Pro, I did have instance to use Kuriboh, especially in its epic duel against a Constellar player I once was in. So while this card has definitely fallen out of favor, it still does what it needs to do, and nobody sees it coming. And now we get ourselves into the Arc 5 lineup with Furballs Kuriboh, one of my favorite Kuribohs via my artwork, which is a level 1 Dark Fiend with the same stats as Kuribohs all have. And when an opposed monster declares a direct attack, you can summon it from your hand, change the attack target to this monster, and you gain life instead of taking the damage. This card it's a really nice looking card. It's another lady Kuriboh with a star on its butt. And I really like it. It's very Christmassy sort of feel. I love the effect. Being able to not only protect you, but also gain back some of your life points is amazing. While it is true that the manga version was slightly better, as it could make it so all Kuribohs who would take damage give you life, the reason that was changed, well, I'll allow past Memphis to explain. Just ram this thing into big attack one monsters, gain a ton of life points. So I sound so full of life and youth back in the day. But yes, Furballs Kuriboh was a very nice Kuriboh monster. Depending on the build, you run between 1 and 3 of this one as well. 2 is usually a good number to stay at, and it's just a really nice Kuriboh monster. Next up, we're looking at the Kuriboh Pendulum Monsters, Furballs Baroque Kuriboh, and Furballs Classic Kuriboh, or the Beethoven Mozart fanfic you never thought you wanted to read. Baroque Kuriboh is a level 8 Dark Fiend with a scale of 1 with 300 attack and 3000 defense, and its Pendulum effect allows you to add a Kuriboh or anything with 300 attack, 200 defense from your deck to your hand at the start of the battle phase, but then destroys itself. In the hand, if a monster of yours is destroyed by battle, you can summon it from your hand. Your opponent has to attack it, but if this guy gets attacked, he gets switched to attack mode at the end of the damage step. Classic Kuriboh, meanwhile, is a level 1 Dark Fiend with scale of 8, same stats as other Kuribohs. When your opponent declares a direct attack, he gets destroyed. If he's destroyed by his own effect, he ends the battle phase. You can discard him to target a card in your pendulum zone, and its scale becomes 1. And if you take damage while it's in the grave, you can set it to your zone. These are certainly cards I was never expecting to happen for Kuriboh. I was honestly hoping they would get their own version of Ojama Red, but this is certainly something. These have some varying uses. Barak Kuriboh does search out literally any Kuriboh monster, including Kuriboh, and Classic Kuriboh is definitely very defensive, seeing as it's able to destroy itself to end the battle phase, which is very much reminiscent of what Kuribohs can do. However, there's a couple of problems I very much have with these monsters. It's mostly around Barak Kuriboh. Classic Kuriboh, he's okay. He's okay, but Barak Kuriboh, let's look at Barak Kuriboh real quick. Why is he level 8? I know he's got 3,000 defense, but if this guy had been level 5, it would have been perfect, because then you could use 5-star Twilight on it. And for that matter, why is he scale of 1? Let me tell you some about Kuribohs. They're all level 1. Why would you want a scale 1 in an archetype when everything is level 1? This should have been scale of 0. I don't care if it has this stipulation, you can only pendulum summon Kuribohs, that would still be better than this. So while Barak Kuriboh's okay, he's definitely the problem child of the two. Classic Kuriboh's definitely decent enough, he does stop your opponent from doing the damage, but don't expect it to save you more than once. In a deck using these cards as pendulum scales, if it's Kuriboh based or not, I would not run too many copies of these. I would definitely max out on Classic Kuriboh and maybe 1 or 2 Barak Kuribohs. And finally, we get ourselves into the Vrains era with Link Kuriboh, a Link 1 Dark Cybus with 300 attack, which requires a level 1 monster, and an opponent's monster declares an attack. You contribute this card to change that monster's attack to 0 until the end of the turn, and if it's in the grave, you contribute a level 1 monster to summon this card, but you can only use this effect once per turn. Link Kuriboh is definitely one of the most famous Kuribohs in this whole entire game, being that he is used in a lot of different meta decks that run level 1 monsters. It's very easy to just put them in there, link away your level 1 monsters that you want to be sent to the graveyard, and bring out a monster that can protect your big old board after you've made said big old board. Having the non-targeted attack change just immediately puts your opponent in defense after they've tried to out your big old monsters or your floodgates or what have you. And what's better about Link Kuriboh is that he can just come back by tributing a level 1 monster. The Link Kuriboh draw engine is just that powerful, ladies and gentlemen. Being able to change the attack of an opponent's monster non-targeting to 0 is actually fairly decent. It allows you to protect your big old board monsters from being run over by even bigger board monsters. And being able to revive itself by tributing level 1 monsters is perfect for the Kuriboh archetype, especially if you're tributing something like Link Kuriboh, because then you get to draw a card off of it. Just an amazing card in all ways, shapes, and form. And so long as there's a need for Link 1 monsters, Link Kuriboh is going to be run in pretty much any deck under the sun. In an actual Kuriboh deck, you really only need to run 1 copy, because you can just recover him by tributing your level 1 monsters, so there you go, he's the star of the show. And I keep calling him a boy, he's a girl, he's a girl, he's a boy. I don't know, he's a he, she, attack helicopter. And finally, oh boy is it time to talk about these. Okay, let's get this over with. The 7's Kuribohs. First off, Kuriboh, which is a level 1 Dark Fiend with same stats as the Kuriboh. If you control no other monsters, you can pay 500 to add a Kuriboh from grave to hand. So, immediately getting over the fact that this card is literally just Sphere Kuriboh with a stovepipe and a trumpet stuck in its head and face paint on its face. This card is a thing. If you've never played Rush Duels, you're not going to understand what this thing's purpose is, but essentially this is a tribute engine sort of thing. So what you're going to do with Kuriboh is, you have one in the hand, one in the grave, you summon Kuriboh, use its effect to recover the Kuriboh in your grave, summon out the other Kuriboh, and then you tribute them for tributes. That's the idea. You can either go for 2 level 6s or level 7 and up. That's what you can do with this card. That is what it does. It's on the card. That's its entire purpose. If you want to make a Rush Duel deck, you run 3 of it. The reason? Because of the spell card, Kuriboh Triple, which is a normal spell. It allows you to shuffle 3 Kuribohs from grave into the deck to draw 2 cards. But what does Kuriboh Triple Dude! Jokes aside, it's a recovery and a draw spell. Rush Duels has a lot of those, so that is the thing. It's the thing that Kuriboh bots do. And finally, it's time to talk about the last Kuriboh card, Kuriboh Torero, their own fusion monster in the Rush Duel format. That's right, this is a level 6 fusion of Kuriboh and Siesta Torero, 1200 attack and 2200 defense, which allows you to pay 500 to choose a defense position monster of your opponent's and return it to the hand. Oh boy, better stock up on those stop attacks. Let me tell you, that's some broken shit right there. But yeah, this is it's a Kuriboh. I like to think that he brutally murdered Siesta Torero for the fusion. He just stole his hat and his cape and his sword and shoved Siesta Torero's hat over a stovepipe. And that's the actual lore. That's what I'm going with. That's all there is to it, folks. There's Kuriboh Taro. He's a fusion. Kuribohs have a fusion. Now you can run Sabatiel in your Rush Duel decks if you could actually do that. Kuribohs as an archetype have existed since time immemorial, and so long as Yu-Gi-Oh continues down its path, there will always be more Kuribohs. Every main character requires a Kuriboh. Sometimes the side characters deserve Kuribohs, but so long as it continues on the path, Kuribohs will continue to protect the players from all of the damage in one form or another. And while some of their members have seen some limited meta version play, the deck will itself forever remain, in my heart at least, a rogue contender for just screwing with people and doing what they do best. It's a deck fit for experimentation with so many different variants, you would be surprised at how many variants they can do. Everything from Fusion Kuribohs, Synchro Kuriboh, Chaos Kuriboh, Sky Scourge Kuribohs, regular Kuribohs, Stalling Kuribohs, Burning Kuribohs, Winged Kuribohs, and Super Chibi Kawaii Desu Moe Mode Kuribohs. I have cherished Kuribohs for so many years, and I shall continue to do so. So long as there are new Kuribohs, I shall look at them, I shall cherish them, I shall adore them, even if they all turn out like Kuriboh somehow. Thank you everyone at home for watching today's video. Do remember to hit the like button if you do like yourself some Kuribohs, and your boy Memphis will see you guys again next time with more Yu-Gi-Oh action. Until next time, y'all take care now.